All right, let's dive right into this, because today we're going to reconstruct what is arguably the most dramatic, totally apocalyptic 24 hours in the entire history of our planet. For 160 million years, dinosaurs were the absolute, undisputed rulers of Earth. I mean, they were the masters of the biosphere, and honestly, it seemed like their reign was never going to end. But in literally a single day, their whole world was just shattered, permanently. So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at the hard evidence to reconstruct the last day of the dinosaurs. It's basically a 66-million-year-old murder mystery that completely hit the reset button on the course of life on Earth. To really get a sense of the scale here, you have to ask yourself a staggering question. What actually happens when a rock the size of Mount Everest, traveling at an incomprehensible 20 kilometers per second, just slams into our planet? It sounds like pure Hollywood science fiction, right? But as we're about to see, the reality of this event is way more terrifying and honestly way more cinematic than any movie you've ever watched. Section 1. Life in the Late Cretaceous. Okay, so before the sky literally falls, let's set the stage. What did the world look like just hours before everything changed forever? Well, if you could jump into a time machine and travel back to Earth 66 million years ago, it would actually look surprisingly familiar to you. That massive supercontinent, Pangaea, it had already drifted apart into shapes you definitely recognize. North and South America were splitting, and Africa and Australia looked a lot like they do today. The climate was cooling down a bit, and polar ice caps were starting to form, but it was still significantly warmer than our modern world. And the landscapes were incredibly lush. They were covered in this brand new evolutionary invention, flowering plants. Imagine these dense, beautiful forests filled not just with ancient ferns, but with modern-looking ash and beech trees, just buzzing with butterflies and bees. It was a thriving, vibrant world, and the dinosaurs were at the absolute peak of their dominance. But we should also talk about who else was living in those beautiful forests. Mammals. Now, we often think of mammals during the dinosaur age as just these tiny, trembling little mice hiding in the shadows, right? But when you look at the data, the reality is much wilder. You had the 20-centimeter saber-toothed squirrel hunting down insects. You had the 9-kilogram Ventana cerci walking around with this massive, heavily armored skull. And most incredibly, you had Repenomamus. This was a predator roughly the size of a badger or a Tasmanian devil, and it actually hunted small and baby dinosaurs. So sure, mammals were the underdogs, but they were already ambitious, and they were already highly adaptable. Still, let's be real, the dinosaurs were the undisputed kings. And nothing illustrates that better than this staggering number, 38 tons. That is the weight of the Alamosaurus, a 29-meter-tall herbivore that was just roaming the earth on this fateful day. Think about this. Just to survive, a single Alamosaurus needed to strip and consume a full ton of vegetation every single day. The sheer scale and the metabolic demands of these creatures were just mind-boggling. Section 2. Hours until the impact. All right, let's start the clock. We're entering the final hours of the Mesozoic era, and the animals on Earth have absolutely no idea what is hurtling towards them through the vacuum of space. The clock is ticking, but for the animal kingdom, it's just a normal Tuesday. If we track the timeline, 5 hours before impact, you've got a herd of 50 towering Alamosauruses peacefully grazing right on the Yucatan Peninsula. Meanwhile, way over in Asia, a 14-meter-long predatory Tarbosaurus is stalking its next meal. 3 hours out, a dome-headed Pachycephalosaurus is foraging for seeds near the ocean, while the heavily argored Ankylosaurus mother gently guides her 4 newly hatched babies through a North American forest. It's incredibly mundane. And then, at exactly 2 hours before the impact, a young, absent-minded Carnotaurus makes a fatal mistake. It wanders straight into the territory of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Now this is a lethal mismatch. The T-Rex is the ultimate apex predator. It's got binocular vision for perfect depth perception, a sense of smell that puts modern hawks to shame, and jaws literally built to shatter bone. Because a T-Rex requires 100 kilograms of meat a day, which is the equivalent of what 3 or 4 modern lions eat, by the way, it absolutely does not pass up a free meal. The T-Rex outweighs this trespassing Carnotaurus by a massive 5 tons. It violently and very quickly tears the intruder to pieces. The T-Rex immediately starts its bloody feast, totally consumed by its prize. And because it's so incredibly distracted by this massive meal, the mighty T-Rex doesn't even bother to look up. Just minutes away from impact, a 10-kilometer-wide asteroid weighing several trillion tons violently pierces Earth's atmosphere. It's squashing columns of air beneath it like a massive piston, and that intense friction heats the giant space rock to tens of thousands of degrees. It begins burning brighter than the sun itself. The T-Rex lifts its head and is instantly blinded. Even when it squeezes its eyelids shut, the intense light is literally burning its eyes right from its closed lids. The sheer radiating heat begins to set the surrounding grass and trees on fire. Section 3. 0 hour. The asteroid strikes. The sky goes blindingly white as the rock slams directly into the shallow waters of the Gulf of Mexico. 10 billion. Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. The impact released the equivalent energy of 10 billion Hiroshima atomic bombs in a single second. The asteroid instantly punched a hole 20 kilometers deep right into the Earth's crust. Remember that peaceful herd of Allosaurus grazing on the Yucatan Peninsula 5 hours ago? They didn't even have time to register what was happening. The unthinkable heat incinerated them in a fraction of a millisecond, literally turning their massive bones into ash instantly. The sheer physics of the shockwave that followed are honestly hard to comprehend. To give you some context, the infamous Krakatoa volcanic eruption back in the 1800s was loud enough to rupture the eardrums of sailors 70 kilometers away. Well, this asteroid blast was 1 million times more powerful than Krakatoa. A supersonic shockwave rippled outward, so incredibly violent that it skinned animals alive. Hundreds of kilometers away, that mighty T-Rex, still standing over its meal, was lifted into the air like a helium balloon. The sheer concussive force gave the apex predator a fatal brain injury before it ever even hit the ground. And as if that blast wasn't enough, the Earth itself began to crack open. The impact triggered massive earthquakes, registering an unbelievable 11.2 on the Richter scale. For perspective, the strongest earthquake in recorded human history was a 9.5 in Chile back in 1960. Because the Richter scale is exponential, an 11.2 earthquake actually releases about 30 times more energy than the strongest quake humanity has ever witnessed. The planet shook with such terrifying violence that every single volcano on Earth was simultaneously jolted awake. Section 4. Global Catastrophe and Aftermath. Surviving that initial blast? That was only the beginning of a relentless global nightmare. Localized survival became biologically impossible against a multi-pronged global attack. Step 1. Global fires erupted everywhere. Remember that mother Ankylosaurus in the forest? Her heavy armor was completely useless against a forest fire that incinerated everything instantly. Step 2. 15 trillion tons of vaporized rock were blasted up into space, cooled in orbit, and then rained back down as a scorching hail of glass and hot stone. Step 3. Mega tsunamis. We're talking waves 100 meters high. That's 10 times taller than the devastating 2011 Japan tsunami, flooding entire continents. Our seed-eating Pachycephalosaurus was violently dragged straight into the abyssal ocean. And finally, Step 4. A terrifying toxic ash cloud from all those awakened volcanoes, superheated to 150 degrees Celsius, raced across the globe at 18,000 kilometers per hour, basically boiling everything in its path. Now, I know this sounds exactly like an over-the-top Hollywood script, but the crazy part is, we have the physical geological receipts to prove it. In 1990, scientists literally found the murder weapon's footprint, the 180-kilometer-wide Chicxulub crater buried down in the Yucatan. Furthermore, all over the world, in clay dating back exactly 66 million years, we find a dense layer of iridium. That's a rare metal that is super common in asteroids but incredibly rare on Earth's surface. And just recently, in a New Jersey quarry, paleontologists found a mass grave of 25,000 animal fossil fragments all piled up together. These creatures didn't just die in the same era. They died on the exact same horrifying day, swept up and crushed by those catastrophic tsunamis. For the very few creatures that somehow managed to survive the extreme heat, the roaring tsunamis, and the raining glass, their reward was absolute, punishing darkness. Impact winter. Our Asian Tarbosaurus actually survived that initial 150-degree heat wave by hiding deep inside an underground cave. But when it finally emerged, the world was totally unrecognizable. Hundreds of billions of tons of sulfur and ash had completely blotted out the sun. Even at high noon, it was pitch black. Temperatures plummeted by 28 degrees Celsius worldwide. Sulfuric acid poured from the sky, poisoning the water in the soil. With no sunlight, the plants died. With no plants, the herbivores starved. And eventually, wandering through this freezing, decaying wasteland, the mighty Tarbosaurus starved to death too. The era of the dinosaurs was officially over. Section 5. The dawn of mammals. But out of the ashes of the Mesozoic era, a new era, the Cenozoic, was ready to begin. You see, this apocalypse was the ultimate evolutionary reset button. And there is a beautiful ultimate irony to evolution here. For 160 million years, the dinosaurs' massive size was their absolute greatest strength. But on this specific day, it became their fatal flaw. The mammals won precisely because they were small. By seeking shelter in underground burrows and hiding deep inside tree roots, they literally avoided the scorching heat and the glass rain. They were incredibly adaptable. They could survive on tiny amounts of insects or dead plant matter instead of needing a literal ton of fresh leaves every single day. And their fast reproductive cycles meant they could rapidly bounce back in a harsh, dark world. Against all odds, the underdogs inherited the Earth. And that evolutionary victory is what paved the long, slow road to the emergence of Homo sapiens, us. We are now the dominant species on this rock. But we've really only been here for a tiny fraction of a second compared to the dinosaurs. They ruled for 160 million years. We've conquered the globe for only a few million. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Considering how quickly and how violently the universe can just hit the reset button, will humanity even come close to breaking the ancient reptiles' record? I guess only time and perhaps the stars will tell. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.